Good morning all, we're due to be starting shortly. Thank you for joining us.
Per, we are ready to go.
Good morning, Per. Over to you. You're currently on mute. We look forward to opening this second day of the conference.
Okay, then I start here. Welcome everybody to the second day and the second exciting day of this EOSC Research Infrastructure Conference. So this session will start in this morning. We will look a bit into the future. So present and future, and we will move right into it because we are already a few minutes behind schedule, I think. So it is a panel here with Sverker Holmgren from the e-Infrastructure Reflection Group, Fulvio Galeazzi from the EOSC Pillar project, Tiziana Ferrari from the EOSC-hub, and Helmut Dosch from his vice chair of LEAPS and at DESI. So we will look into get a report from horizontal EOSC services and a bit of national perspective and the thematic perspective on this, and also with an outlook into the future. So I hope you will enjoy this, and there will be possibilities to ask questions. And for that, I will hope you can use or find the question and answer facility. Depending on your settings, you might have to move your mouse in the bottom of the screen for a menu to pop up, and there you see Q&A, and there you can type in questions while the presentations are going on, and then we will answer it in the end of the panel session after all the speakers. For other conversation, use the chat, but we will not pick up questions from the chat for the panelists unless that is not the point. I should also remind you to go to the web page of a questionnaire, the breakout questionnaire, and you find the link in the chat if you browse around there a bit. With that, I think we should be set for the first speaker. So, resources and services tools for thematic providers, users from a national perspective. I ask Sverker Holmgren from e-Infrastructure Reflection Group to, yes, there you are, lighten up. Welcome, Sverker. I hand it over to you.
I will start to share my screen. So, is that okay? I guess it is.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So, as Per said, my name is Sverker Holmgren. I'm a professor at Uppsala University, currently also at Chalmers Institute of Technology in Sweden. And I'm a delegate in this e-Infrastructure Reflection Group, and I'm also an expert in the Swedish ESFRI delegation. So what I will talk about today is mostly on the recent report from e-IRG on the national nodes perspective for EOSC. And I will also give a little bit of an example and an update of a situation in a country, my country, Sweden. And what I will say is closely related to the message that I gave in the La Palma workshop. Some of you maybe was there, but maybe not all of you. So maybe you will recognize some of this. So e-IRG as such, the group described the e-infrastructure commons in a white paper in 2013. And that is basically the e-infrastructure foundation for EOSC. So if you add aspects of data sharing, open science, etc., you will have the EOSC. And many of you have seen this picture before. We have this common e-infrastructure layer or cloud in the bottom with tools and services, data, computing networks, etc. And then we have the ESFRIs, we have other research infrastructures and international projects like vertical structures that feed into and use this infrastructure commons cloud. So that is the setting that I'm talking about, and that is also the setting for EOSC. In the recent document, the National Notes document, and from last year, there are two main recommendations towards national government and funding agencies. So they are that they should reinforce their efforts, so do more, to embrace the e-infrastructure coordination at the national level and build strong national e-infrastructure blocks. So essentially providing integrated e-infrastructures at the national level that can naturally feed into and use the EOSC structure at the European level. And then also analyze and evaluate the national e-infrastructure funding and governance mechanisms, trying to see how this can be developed further to, for example, enable good collaboration and cooperation between vertical research infrastructures and the horizontal e-infrastructures. So those are the main two recommendations in this document. A little bit of a sidetrack. Actually, there are two other e-IRG publications that I want to remind you of. One is quite old. So if we go back to 2013, there was a result of a joint ESFRI EOSC group, or a group with joint participation, presented in a policy recommendation. And that is then a policy recommendation on data management. And again, you can see that a lot of what is said there is actually now happening at the European level within EOSC. And also, I would like to, in this context of ESFRI and EOSC, to remind you of a paper or a report from EIRG, a guide to e-infrastructure requirements for European research infrastructures from 2017. And that was then the material or what was used for the e-needs in the ESFRI 2018 round of applications, just as a sidetrack. Okay, where does this come from, the National Nodes document? Well, it comes from a Competitive Council conclusion in 2018, where member states are encouraged to invite their communities, e-infrastructures, research infrastructures, to get organized to prepare for EOSC. So member states should prepare for EOSC. And then the Commission calls on existing structures and projects, and for example, EIRG, to make sure that their knowledge and expertise is used. So this is what EIRG did. In response to that council conclusion, we did this National Nodes report, and it's based on analysis of responses from a lot of countries, so almost all of the countries in Europe, to see what is the current situation. And then this was in late 2018, early 2019 then, so some time ago. The overall conclusions here is that at that point, some countries do indeed have a single coordinating and integrated e-infrastructure service entity, but in many cases, data infrastructures are separated from the computing and networking ones, and sometimes they are even competing, which makes it difficult to get organized then for joining EOSC. Many countries show at least some level of coordination, at least within the networking and computing, And at that point already, a number of countries had ongoing processes aiming at coordination of the infrastructures and their interfaces to the main research infrastructures. And some countries describe interesting mechanisms for channeling funding to horizontal research infrastructures via domain research infrastructures, and I'll come back to that in the Swedish example in a second. So, in Sweden then, just because it is the country that I, of course, know best, there are currently 3 e-infrastructure entities. It's SUNET, the networking, SNIC for coding and project storage, and Swedish National Data Service for data access, basically. And of course, then Sweden participates in a lot of domain research infrastructures, Elixir, ICOS, etc. And there are national infrastructures, for example, the Synchrotron Max 4. Both e-infrastructures and domain research infrastructures are owned by university consortia. The exception is networking, which is actually owned by the Swedish Research Council. So all of these infrastructures, both E and domain, are university entities, which are funded jointly by the universities and the Swedish Research Council. So it's sort of the same setting for both. And there is an established mechanism to channel funding to Horizon E infrastructures with the involvement of research communities from the research infrastructures. And that's an interesting concept. So when a Swedish researcher or a Swedish research infrastructure applies for funding from the Swedish Research Council, they should note, first of all, that these e-infrastructures exist and they do not provide free services. Instead, the research infrastructure should budget for their e-infrastructure, and before submitting the application, they should have a discussion with the one or more of these 3, SUNET, SNIC, and the SND. So that's the setting that is there, and it's used, and it has been used for a couple of years. Actually, the same type of setting is also used in Norway, and it was earlier there, but I will not go into details because I don't want to describe the details of something that I may not know.
2 minutes, Sverker.
Yes, so I am concluding. So what is happening right now? Well, at the moment, there is a joint proposal from the universities and the Swedish Research Council to integrate these e-infrastructures, so networking, computing, and data access, and potentially form a single organization of them. And that is, as I said, a joint proposal from universities and the Swedish Research Council. There are several universities that are integrating their e-infrastructures locally and then towards the national setting and the international setting. And I'm actually myself working with this at Chalmers Institute of Technology and also at Karolinska Institute in Sweden. I would be happy to talk more about that in another setting, but not now. The focus of this integration at the universities and also nationally is on research data, including FAIR and data sharing. So it's sort of related to EOSC, of course. And the discussions locally and nationally include the connections between domain research infrastructures and the participation in e-infrastructures. So I would say that this is happening, even though it might not be very quick always, but it is happening, at least in Sweden. So conclusion, from the e-IRG document, it's clear that the national building blocks and engagement of also research performing organizations, that's the key for success of EOSC. There is a danger of a disconnect between local, national, and European e-infrastructures because in many countries this integration or creation of national nodes is not there. But at least in some, or rather at least in some countries that have established the infrastructures, it's very clear that the funding also for EOSC activities, it's mainly at the national and local level. So again, the engagement from the national and local level is very, very important. And of course, the common currency here between the e-infrastructures and research infrastructures at all levels its data. So there is where the focus of interaction is naturally placed. So I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Sverker, and thank you very much for bringing to the attention that what is almost a prerequisite for EOSC is that we are able to describe both the organization and architecture of the national infrastructures here, if that's absolutely necessary for them to interoperate in any way. So this needs more attention. Thank you very much, Sverker. If you could stop the sharing, I will ask Fulvio, who should be here somewhere.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
Good morning.
hello, good morning, good morning. So, resources and services tools for thematic providers uses from a regional perspective. So, Fulvio is from one of the regional EOSC projects, and please give us enlighten us on what EOSC Pillar is about. Yeah.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, here we are. So good morning, everyone. I'm Fulvio Galeazzi, single L double Z, and I am the project manager of EOSC Pillar, which, as Per was saying, is one of the 5 projects funded in the EOSC-5 subtopic B call. The other project in the same subtopic were all regional or thematic, and the names are EOSC Synergy, Nordic, NIFOS, and Expanse. I will shortly introduce the project so that we can better understand what conclusion can be drawn. Okay, yes, it changed. So, no, too much. Oops, sorry. There's a lag. Okay. So very briefly, here is our project. There are 5 countries represented: Germany, Belgium, France, Austria, and Italy. It's led by GAR, the National Research Education Network in Italy. And our partners are 18 in total, and you see the logos down there. Our vision is to act as a bridge, I would say, to connect scientific communities and national initiatives and member states to the European Science Cloud. And we aim to do this design activities along 2 main tracks. One is a technical track and other non-technical activities, which we termed social aspects. We go a little bit more detail now. On the non-technical part, our focus is on national initiatives. We believe strongly that national initiatives are fundamental in ensuring that the EOSC is functional, is effective, is useful, and it can be sustained in the future. National initiatives being the places where all the stakeholders, the EOSC relevant stakeholders meet at the natural place which is rooted in the research community, and last but not least is also the place where the funding comes from, as it was just said by the previous speaker. So along this track, we conducted a national initiative survey to map the landscape to see where we are in terms of along several different dimensions. You can find the outcome of the survey on the EOSC Secretariat website, for example, as well as our website. And this exercise, which took us quite some time, was coordinated with the other regional projects. And all the information we gathered was fed into the EOSC Executive Board Working Group landscape to help provide the full picture. As I say, we are convinced of the importance of the national level, so we are also investing our energies into trying to understand and understand how to better work with national initiatives, help them get up to speed so they can be seamlessly integrated into the EOSC. From the technical part, I just want to mention that we are building a federated fair data space to be used by scientific communities, which so that they will be able to share, find, and use the data. And this is not being built from scratch, but of course builds upon existing protocols and frameworks and other activities carried on in other projects. So it capitalizes on the experience of others. It is built starting from the needs of 9 use cases, so 9 specific services coming from our community of partners. We are also investing efforts in design catalogs of services at the national level, because we think this is very relevant to the national initiatives and may allow more services to come up to the service and they can be helped to be brought up to the European level if they so desire. And these national catalogs, of course, are designed with the intention to have them federated and interoperable with the central ones. And we want to link services to data, and of course, this is not going to happen at the very last day of the project, because we also want this to be, we want to be to see this service in operation. So we want to allow a few months, actually 1 year, so that we can see how this interaction develops and address possible technical and procedural issues which may stem from during the course, during the lifetime of the project. So what is a connection to ESFRI and research infrastructure? Well, as I said, as you may have guessed, EOSC Pillar is not really tightly attached to ESFRI and research infrastructure. For the so-called social part, we focus on national initiatives to support the creation, reinforcement, and alignment of national initiatives, which means that where all the stakeholders are represented. So this includes the research infrastructures, of course, but there's not specifically targeting them. On the technical side, which is responsible for bringing up new services and helping them make the last step so that they can be used via the EOS portals. I say we identify 9 use cases from our communities. Again, there is no explicit link to research infrastructure except for 1 use case, which is connected to Elixir. So one may rightfully wonder, why are in this session then? Wait, if we take a better look, we see that the fact that we don't have explicit tie links doesn't mean that these links do not exist. So we expect the contact with the research infrastructure to be established at the national level. This, by the way, given the time span of the projects, would ensure longer lasting links. And this is, of course, important for research infrastructure who have a history of several years of activities, putting together the community, defining standards, best practices, and so on. We understand the large research infrastructure probably wouldn't find them at ease with the national level and also at the regional level, maybe because the size may be too small for them. I have to say that the large regional projects do have a level of coordination, a cross-project coordination board. However, it's probably I'm not sure that this is going to be the best channel for research infrastructure to be to make their voices heard. For sure, it can act as a multiplier of voice if this same request comes from the different legs of the research infrastructure in the various countries. But probably they would, given their size and the fact that they represent a solid community, well established, they would probably deserve their own voice and their own channels. I'll say that the EOSC Pillar is a vehicle for national initiative towards Europe, and we involve all stakeholders, including research infrastructures. So research infrastructure, of course, need to be part of these because they intercept a large fraction of the research community. But if we move it further, national initiatives should aim at inclusiveness. So smaller research infrastructure need to be captured, and probably that is the most adequate level to capture at least some of these smaller or younger research infrastructures. So yes, these connections do exist and will need to be reinforced in the future. Last slide with some thoughts to be developed later on in the roundtable. EOSC is impacting research infrastructure and will be impacting research infrastructure. We need to make sure that this is a positive effect. We heard yesterday about this kind of impacts at any level, at the technical level, the service offer level, at the financial level. So tensions may arise, duplication of efforts may arise. We need to be very careful to avoid this, ensure the inclusiveness, and maximize the benefits for the parties involved. I'll say that the regional projects, in our view, can be another means of interaction with EOSC. But to do this, there is a caveat that we need to have effective communication channels, not just multiply the channels, but have them effective and have a coordinated action across regions. It is true that regional projects have a very limited time span, but it is also true that during these few months or years ahead of us, the EOSC will take off. So these are the crucial ones. So I believe it's very important that we have a tight link with the research infrastructure, because this is where we lay the foundation of the EOSC. It is also true that research infrastructure, as I said, are the results of years of efforts, and they perceived and actually managed to achieve much of the same goals that the EOSC has in building the community, making them aligned, also transnationally. So all of these assets are important, and I think that EOSC should build upon these assets, and at the same time support the evolution of the younger and smaller research infrastructures. And last, EOSC is meant for researchers. So as I said, research infrastructure need to have a strong position in its foundation and in its operation. And with this, I have concluded. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Fulvio. Then we move on directly to next speaker, Tiziana Ferrari from the EOSC-hub, who will talk about resources and services tools for thematic providers, uses from a European perspective. Are you ready, Tiziana? And for transparency, I should say I'm also heavily involved in the EOSC-hub myself, so I'm totally biased concerning this. Please, Tiziana, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for this invitation. In these 10 minutes, I will present an overview of the experience that two cooperating projects, EOSC-hub and OpenAir, have been gathering in the last 3 years of operations. And the main focus of this presentation is to illustrate how the EOSC architecture can support increasingly the reuse of data, thanks to the integration of e-infrastructures bringing horizontal services and research infrastructures bringing research outputs and fair data. First of all, a word about the service portfolio of these two collaborating projects. The infrastructures represented by EGI, UDAT, Indigo, together with OpenAir, bring horizontal services for distributed data management, computing, and for scholarly communications, for sharing, evaluating, and monitoring sciences. And as illustrated in this picture, these services are complementing community-specific services coming from research infrastructures that participate in our consortia or have been supported through different supported channels that have been provided in the last years. Specifically for EOSC-hub, we have two components in our portfolio, services which are horizontal for cloud HTC and storage facilities, adding value services for federated access, and specific services coming from research infrastructures research projects and collaborations that bring simulation tools, data, and analytics, adding value services for specific research communities. Complementing these, we have been developing and operating services that are components of the EOSC core, like the marketplace, federated AI, accounting, monitoring, and help desk. So the question for our project was how these services can advance open science and increase excellence in the European research area. The two projects have a value. They bring together the two souls of our community, the horizontal services, HS in the slide, and the thematic services. The provisioning specifically for EOSC-hub has been through pledged resources that have been allocated to communities for co-design, expert support, and testing. And the two thematic services are selected initial portfolio to be expanded over the years. That allowed to bring also community-specific functionality to the end users. The funding of these services benefited from the European Commission funding through virtual access and in-kind contributions that were coming from the infrastructures and our national nodes specifically to bring an increased capacity to scale up the use cases. An additional provisioning channel is through the portal, which started 2 years ago, if you remember, and both horizontal and thematic services of the projects come as orderable services or services which are freely accessible through APIs, for example. Today, the portal is in full operations. We have 57 orderable services among in total 260 different instances. And we have been gathering more and more access requests. And for example, some of these have been originating from more than 25 countries and 150 unique users. The complexity that comes through the portal and that we have been experiencing in the last years is that the funding models of the providers participating are very different. We have sponsored access from national funding agencies, and from the European Commission, policy-based access, but also pay for use from research providers and commercial providers. And the complexity of use cases is that they have to face different access policies and different ways of getting access to data and services. The portfolio of communities that have been supported is very broad. We have a large community in the area of earth and environmental sciences, but also physics, life sciences, multidisciplinary science, and social sciences and humanities. And this picture shows the variety of user communities that have been supported specifically, in this case, in EOSC-hub. The provisioning of operational services through the thematic services has been complemented through dedicated support structures, competence centers that have been tailored to the need of research infrastructures, and the early adopter program, which has been very successful in engaging research projects that have complex digital needs and benefited from also expert support in getting the necessary services to support their scientific challenges. The integration use cases, and this slide provides more information of what are the capabilities that have been supported in EOSC-hub, span through 3 major categories, starting from the left, data management services and science-ready data, computer services, AI, and other services like scientific portals and operational services for the Federation. In this portfolio of use cases, what was key is provisioning of coordinated expert support, bringing together providers, technology providers, and user communities for co-design. And this has been one of the major value propositions of EOSC-hub that we think with our experience should continue in the future as one of the key assets of the European Open Science Cloud. In this diagram, I'm showing some of the most common use cases and mapping these to the architecture, the core, the federated data, and the exchange. In our experience, choosing just two cases, one from LOFAR and one from Orpheus, which are however very representative of also other research infrastructures.
2 minutes.
The research infrastructures bring data in the form of long-term archived data or data after the embargo period. This data is mirrored and staged into e-infrastructures for data reduction, which is then feeding back data products into data repositories that belong to the federated data. Or data after embargo is made available for reuse and analysis through different data analytics platforms that can be hosted in the European Open Science Cloud to increase the reuse of data. This focus on the necessity of reusing of data has also emerged from an important paper that was jointly developed by the 5 ESFRI clusters and the infrastructures, where mission of EOSC is to provide facilities, services, and tools and funding mechanisms to increase reuse of data over the long period. Concluding, the lessons learned in the last 3 years is that federation of integrated services with the necessary expert support is much more complex and requires more organizational structures than just the EOSC as a directory of data and services. We need to think thoroughly about business processes and allocation of resources, as this can become non-trivial when we have heterogeneous business models which are exposed to EOSC through the exchange. So we really need careful thinking about the major value proposition of EOSC and how all these capacities can come together as an integrated offer to the end user. And with this, I've concluded my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiziana. So if you have questions for Tiziana and the other speakers, please put them in the Q&A box that you find on the bottom, typically on the bottom of your screen, and we come back to those. So final speaker here, Helmut Dosch from LEAPS, and here comes the screen, the slides, and let's jump into that immediately. Please, Helmut. You are maybe muted.
Yeah, is it still? I'm hearing.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Per. So it's a pleasure to present to you, so to speak, the perspective of LEAPS to the European Open Science Cloud. So just for the unlikely case that you have not heard about LEAPS, so this is a consortium. Oops. It's a consortium out of 17.
Helmut, could you put on your camera, please?
Oops.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have to. Is it okay now? Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to get this picture out of my way. You can still see me now?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So you see here just a fact sheet on LEAPS. So it's a consortium out of 17 national and 2 European facilities, essentially synchrotron radiation and free electron lasers, launched in 2017 with a very clear ambition to really become an engine for science and innovation in Europe by working, so to speak, together in a new way, offering analytical service to more than, as you can see, 24,000 users from all disciplines, academic and industrial, and essentially from many disciplines, all disciplines essentially. So, so we are preparing, and so the topic is actually called Digital Leaps, and this is just to introduce you to that. So we are currently preparing a project which is actually called Digital Leaps. It's about the future development of these facilities in exploring and exploiting new digital concepts and methods. And this has actually been strongly pushed by the current pandemic, from the very start of this pandemic early this year, and now these LEAPS facilities have been almost overrun by biologists and medical doctors who urgently requested beam time for their corona fight, including what you can see here, drug screening, fragment screening, tissue tomography, and many other corona-related studies. We noticed that the strategic relevance of the LEAPS facilities, and in turn understood the relevance to render them resilient against crisis situations like the current one. So this pushed actually our digital LEAPS program very much, which you can see here. I very quickly run over it. It's about artificial intelligence resisted autonomous operation, remote operation for the users, exploiting artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, new communications tools, also artificial intelligence assisted molecular infection fight, but also clearly develop open data concepts, which we call LEAPS EOSC, and that's what you are interested in here. So I show you the potential of that, and also, of course, the challenge we have. So we are in a transformation phase at the moment with LEAPS. So the future will be strongly governed by new high brilliance sources and novel high performance megapixel detectors systems, which deliver, on the one hand side, the revolutionary insights into the machinery of the nanoworld at all length and time scales. But this insight comes in a guise of an unheard rate of data of highest complexity. So the name of the game for the future is, of course, to create new avenues to come from the data to the knowledge. So you see now how it looks today, and this shows also in part the upcoming challenge in the future. So LEAPS sees, as I said, more than 24,000 users from all disciplines working at this more than 300 beam lines across Europe. The users are responsible for the data mining and the data analysis, and our current observation is that it takes typically 1 to 3 years for our users until they produce the first primary publications. So we need, of course, within LEAPS now to explore how we can cope with it. So it's about the extension of our user service also to the data analysis. This requires actually substantial resources, but needs to be solved. So it's a serious challenge. But there is this visionary view for tomorrow, and this opens up, with the LEAPS EOSC, and it looks complicated. It is complex, but the potential is really enormous. So potential future is, that after a necessary embargo period of 2 to 3 years because of the production of the primary publications, LEAPS facilities could produce out of this, so to speak, tier 1 or tier 0 data, sets of useful raw data, including the necessary metadata, the necessary algorithms, and the IT infrastructures for the LEAPS European Open Science Cloud, which are, if everything works according to plan, findable, accessible, and usable for researchers of all disciplines, which you see on the right-hand side. It's clearly a major effort. Requires massive R&D to make it happen. But the new opportunities and the enormous potential for research and innovation in Europe is really mind-blowing if you think about it. LEAPS is producing in a steady state, thousands of data sets of highest precision and reliability every year, gained from this most advanced analytical tools available, and this will be in future, rendered useful for a wide range of academic industrial research or across all over Europe. So that's a clear game changer. The LEAPS and the Neutron community are actually currently working as we speak together within 2 European projects, PANOSC and EXPANS, to develop, the mandatory common data standards, which of course are mandatory, otherwise this would not work. So you will hear by Patrick Fuhrmann in a later intervention more details about it. So this is a very important beginning, but it will need, continuous efforts. So what is my main message here? So I think that I can say that LEAPS is ready to offer all its competences to make this visionary idea happen. My current information is from the LEAPS laboratories that they are ready to become members of the EOSC Association and also offer collaboration. It must be stressed so that it's not part of their mission to serve the EOSC users. So this LEAPS EOSC endeavor would need resources and services from EOSC in some way. Secondly, and this is a bit a reaction to the previous speakers, particularly to Fulvio's intervention on this national initiative and the question, how do we do the coordination? So secondly, I would say it's important that for EOSC to be, LEAPS EOSC to be a sustainable concept. So one needs, I think, this European consortium as a strategic partner, because one would need in the future to make it really sustainable, such a coordinated body which is ready to deliver, to further improve, also to validate, the data standards and also the tools and the concepts which are made available for the LEAPS EOSC users. So how this cooperation with the LEAPS organization can be realized within the EOSC Association, I cannot answer here, but I would encourage the experts among you, to seriously think about it, how this LEAPS EOSC strategic partnership can be really realized. I think it would be very important, as I said, to make this a sustainable concept. Per, this is essentially my last slide. So I thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask all the panelists to put your cameras on so we can give at least some impression of if we have a panel here, people sitting beside each other on the stage. We have had a few questions here in the Q&A. I just go from bottom up here. So there is a question for Helmut here. You are putting into practice what the EOSC regional projects praise, EOSC Pillar, EOSC Synergy and others, to connect national initiatives outside the region. And in this case, not directly through NFDI. Keep on. So this was not a question, but so appreciation of your approach here, Helmut, from LEAP. So it was Nicolas Villacorta from Helmholtz. And then it was a question here on how does LEAPS EOSC coordinate overlap with PANOSC and EXPANS, who are 2 other initiatives, Horizon 2020 initiatives or projects, which involve to a large extent the same facilities. So it's a bit detailed here. What? Yeah.
So I mean, it's clear to answer. So you need, this work now in PANOSC and EXPANS, to create really the mandatory standards. You have to understand, the data which are produced within LEAP are, have very different formats, depending on the tool, depending on the samples. So you have to develop first, the common standards, and this is done in Panaskin expands. So so I would say Panaskin expands are really the necessary R&D work now, and I think we have to continue that in order really to make this LEAPS EOSC happen.
So I will actually jump. I picked up a question here also from that was actually put in the chat by Françoise Genova, and kind of reminder about national research infrastructures. And I broadened this question also to a bit how to include them and how engage them in the big picture here. And I've turned to all the panelists here. Maybe you have some experience. Sverker is waving his hand here, please.
Yes, so I think the natural way to include national research infrastructures in the system is that they are approaching the national open science cloud, so the national entities that we have been advocating for in e-IRG and that are being now created in many countries. And then if there is a pan-European aspect, they can move up, so to say, into those infrastructures later. But I think it's very important that the national initiatives actually go to the national e-infrastructure initiatives and national open science initiatives.
Okay, thank you. Tiziana?
In EOSC-hub, we had a few thematic services coming from national research communities, and the interest and the value proposition in being in EOSC was to be able to open services and data that are funded nationally to international user communities that are not a part of the national mandate. So the interest and the value was in using a European-wide channel to open the access, but also find the mechanisms to support these services more broadly. Hence, the sustainability and funding are key for effective involvement of national initiatives, according to our experience.
May I ask you a follow-up question on that, Tiziana, and also for the other panelists? Because if, for example, here national research infrastructures as then data producers want to take part in a European context, do you think they are, or are you aware if they want to take, let's say, a producer responsibility then? I mean, to take care of the result that other researchers are using their data, produce new data, and actually contribute back to the research infrastructure so they can get more out of it, so to say. Do you see that there is such a thinking behind that the national research infrastructure want to act on the European level, or is there other incentives, so to say, for them? Are there other incentives?
So that's a difficult answer, but I can see a tendency which goes in the right direction. So I think it's interesting to organize that on a European level. So I mean, there are two ways of doing it. So this national thing, either what you just expressed, that you have the national initiatives, and then you coordinate it in a national data system, and then this data system cooperates with the EOSC. You could do it differently, like LEAPS, that the fund the LEAPS labs organize themselves and produce themselves a data system, and this as a whole cooperates then with EOSC. I can say from my work within LEAPS that there's a clear direction to be open, to let the data also access to researchers from Europe after this embargo period, which allows the primary users now to exploit the data at their best competences, and then leave it then to the European Open Science Cloud for further investigations. Whether or not this creates discrepancies, difficulties. Also, I think it's an experiment one has to do, but I think the willingness is there to do it. But we are implementing an embargo period to make sure that the data producers have enough time to exploit the data at the best of their possibilities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So maybe I pick, sorry if I pick questions here a bit randomly now from the Q&A box, but from Ron Decker asked like this: current activities towards EOSC are now national oriented, developing national research infrastructure plan. But how could and should we make use of 20 years of pan-European and domain-oriented research infrastructure developments in ESFRI? So maybe Sverker, who has, or any panelist here that have experience on the ESFRI process.
Well, I can comment a bit. So at the e-infrastructure level, I think it is quite common that the pan-European research infrastructures already today, the national nodes in a pan-European research infrastructure collaborate with national nodes of e-infrastructure. So the collaboration is already there, and a lot of the activities in the pan-European research infrastructures today, at least in many of them, actually is working with national e-infrastructure nodes already. At least I see this in the Nordic countries.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe it will be the final question from down under, Andrew Trailer, RDC. What are the main barriers to greater exploitation of the LEAPS generated data? And I think I asked this question because I think it's general in a sense that applies to many research infrastructure. Access to tools, access to compute, access to ML, access to expertise.
All of them.
Any barrier is
so
there.
I mean, so there are. I would not say barriers, because a barrier is something which you sometimes are inclined that you stop. They stop you. I think I don't see showstoppers here at all. So everything can be done. But it needs hard work. This picture I was showing to you is not, you cannot get it, tomorrow. So it needs efforts, but so neither, the proper raw data, the metadata system, nor the tools which need to be made available to the EOSC users, and the necessary infrastructures to do now data analysis. Nothing is really at the moment prepared in the proper way, but there's no showstopper. If one starts working with it, one can really continuously develop this new picture, but there's no free lunch, as I said. So how to the national labs, of course, not their mission is not, and I don't see whether this is easy to change, that they cannot be responsible to operate this EOSC cloud for the users, because this is not within their mission. So, but they are already to contribute to that. This is a working principle. How to organize that? This is also a resource question. To organize that, this needs to be discussed between the national funding organizations, the European Commission, and so on, to make their a common strategy. This is not so clear. It's not so clear yet, but so everything can be solved.
Yes. That we hope for. But maybe before we conclude here, do you have any observation on this, on the barriers here for a greater exploitation of data in Fulvio from the regional perspective, and any discoveries on this specific things?
Yeah, thanks. I think that probably one of the barriers could be the fact that the research infrastructure tend to be extremely specialized and have already a huge backlog of experience in and they are very solid in their position. So it may be difficult for them to perceive the benefit of joining with the National Open Science Cloud Initiative, for example. They have already, if they are large and they are strong, so what would be the benefit for them, for EOSC? So we have to understand this and make a and propose the EOSC, keeping this in mind. They can still be relevant. The interaction, I think, can still be relevant at the national level, for example, with lobbying with national governments, or in the fact that EOSC opens up to wide new fields of research, because the EOSC is explicitly tackling cross-disciplinarity.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, interesting observation there, I think. So with this, we are already into the break, and I thank the panelists, the audience for the questions, interesting questions. We record these questions and can hopefully come back to some of them by the end of the day also. Now I turn to the organizers who might give us further instructions for the break and the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Per, and thanks to everyone. Yes, we now move to a short break and return at 11:15. The next session, session 4, Present and Future, will be in this webinar, so you're very welcome to stay logged in and rejoin us in the next 12 minutes, I see, looking at my clock. So we'll aim to start promptly at 11:15. Thanks, Tassos. And just as a reminder, the questionnaire with the same questions that we discussed in the breakout sessions is available on the ESFRI website. So feel free to visit that and send any written responses, and they'll be very helpful for all of us. Tassos, Yanis, please could you upgrade Patrick Furman to panelist for the next session? He's currently in the attendees list.
Thank you, Victoria. Patrick is now a panelist.
Super, thanks so much, Yanis. Are we
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Yanis, are we broadcasting at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. If we can just check that we have all of our panelists ready for the next session, that would be really helpful.
Hi, Victoria, this is Nicholas. So I'm online.
Hi, Nicholas, welcome.
This is Giovanni speaking again.
Hi, Giovanni.
Hi.
Do we have Kostas on the line?
Kostas is also asking to get into the panel.
Perfect. Yanis, if you wouldn't mind
Yes,
upgrading
now
Kostas.
Kostas is a panelist. Thank you.
Excellent. Helen from Envry Fair.
Yes, I'm here.
Lovely. Thanks, Helen. Giovanni, we have Patrick. Francisca de Jong. Yes, I see us there. And Rudolph.
Thank you. Is the audio okay?
The audio is great. Thank you.
And
Perfect.
you can hear me also well.
I can hear you, Kostas. Your video is working fine.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Kostas. And Rudolph, I see we have also. So Miriam, we have all of the panelists in place for the next session.
Okay, great. Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks all. Kostas, if you're there, it would be helpful if towards the end of the session you could return the floor to me, to the organisers, and we'll give some brief directions for returning after the break to the breakout sessions, which will be held in the Zoom meeting rather than in the Zoom webinar. welcome back. It's now 11:15. Kostas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. From me too to this session on EOSC present and future with the ESFRI Research Infrastructures and the cluster projects. We are privileged to have a range of distinguished panelists. I make a short introduction one by one. Helen Glaves. Everybody, please put your camera on. Yes, cameras are on. Ellen Glaves, who is from the ENVRI FAIR cluster project. She's the senior data scientist at the British Geological Survey, and she coordinates the Ocean Data Interoperability Platform, and also is involved with the Research Data Alliance since its inception. She will serve as the president of the European Geosciences Union from next year onwards. Then we have Giovanni Lamanna, who is the coordinator of the ESCAPE project, director of lab at CNRS. He has been involved with the conception and preparation of the Cherenkov Telescope Array ESFRI facility, and he's an active astrophysicist and particle physicist. Niklas Blomberg, coordination of EOSC Life cluster. He's also the Elixir founding director since 2013. And he has been has been principal scientist and team leader in computational biology and chemistry at AstraZeneca in Sweden before doing what he does today. Then we have Patrick Furman, the coordinator of the EXPANSE cluster project, who is also representing the PANOSC cluster today. He's a senior scientist and head of the DESI IT project office, working in the area of big data and storage access for more than 50 years. Since 2001, he's leading the international DCache collaboration that provides storage solutions for 70 scientific laboratories worldwide. And then we have Franziska de Jong, who is involved in the SS-HOC cluster project in social sciences and humanities, and is executive director of the Clarin ERIC. She leads the expansion and sustainability of Clarin and the outreach to new user communities. She has been professor of language technology at the University of Twente and director of the Erasmus Studio for e-research at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. And then we have Rudolf Dimper, who is notably involved in the PANOS cluster project. He's the head of the technical infrastructure division of the European synchrotron in Grenoble, ESRF, where he's in charge of the computing infrastructure. He's a chemical engineer by profession, like me, and he had a position before that at the Institut Laurent Langevin in Grenoble, and then he was with the millimeter radio astronomy. So welcome to the session, all of you. Just by way of introduction, I say only 2 words. These cluster projects, all of which are represented today, have been a milestone for us. It is the first time, as far as can I see, that data professionals, together with active researchers, active scientists, and service providers, have come together in such broad thematic domains. So if you want, they are good examples of what could EOSC be in the future in their own domain, and also of the work that will be needed to reach the objectives of EOSC, for example, as these are reflected in the partnership proposal. For example, share data that are fair, promoting the use of data stewards in all research institutions, creating incentives for scientists to be able to share their data, developing, and this is one of the most challenging objectives, interoperability frameworks for interoperability of data across subdomains in a broad domain, but also in the near future for EOSC as a whole, onboarding services through the portal, and so on. So if you want, there are mini EOSCs, these cluster projects, at least this is how I understand them, and very important bridges between the actual users, meaning the generators, the producers, and the consumers of data on the one hand, and the infrastructures like EOSC and the services on the other hand. Now, however, for the future, we need to scale up. We need to connect across these areas. They're already broad, but we need to connect across these areas, and we need to expand to all other areas, including the so-called long tail of science that we are not that they are not being covered currently. So, with these words of welcome, I will pass it to the first speaker, which is Helen Glaves. Helen, the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Kostas. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to try and hopefully share my screen at this point because I have some slides that I will accompany my presentation with. Hopefully, you're all able to see my screen at this point.
It's just coming, I think. Yeah.
Yep, it's there.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Thank you. So, I'm going to talk this morning about ENVRI FAIR, and thank you for the introduction, Kostas, because I think that sets the stage very well for talking about the cluster project. So ENVRI FAIR is actually bringing together and integrating the environmental research infrastructures that are within the ESFRI roadmap. And so this graphic here just gives you a feel for the scope of ENVRI FAIR and the different areas that it covers and how this is very much, as Kostas described it, brings together all of the different disciplines and the different research infrastructures within the environmental domain. So just to say a little bit about the role of the environmental research infrastructures. So the data that is being brought together by the ENVRI research infrastructures actually support the European contribution to global monitoring of the state of the Earth system and to climate. They're also vital for assessing past and defining future policies, and this is quite an important role for the research infrastructures. But also, it's about development of environmental friendly innovations for the future. But critically, one of the key roles for the ENVRI research infrastructures is providing data and research products from all of the subdomains of the Earth system. And ENVRI FAIR itself, the focus of that is very much around developing tools and resources for users. And I want to emphasize that point of users. So we're not creating the ENVRI research community just for the research infrastructures themselves. Our activities are very focused on researchers and users to allow them to gain easy and seamless access to environmental data and services, which is truly fair. But it's also about integrating these research communities and the research products into the European Open Science Cloud. So this is actually one of the key focuses of ENVRI FAIR, is about making sure that the environmental research infrastructures are part of that wider ecosystem of research infrastructures that make up the European Open Science Cloud. And this ultimately then enhances the role of the environmental research infrastructures in promoting an open science paradigm. I don't want to dwell too much on ENVRI FAIR itself, but just to say that it's about bringing together all of those environmental research infrastructures that are represented in the ESFRI roadmap. But not only that, ENVRI FAIR collaborates with the entire community of environmental research infrastructures. So its remit is much wider and also seeks to connect not just with European research infrastructures, but also those elsewhere around the globe. The key outputs of ENVRI FAIR are very much focused around delivery of FAIR compliance services and that are implemented across the entire ENVRI community. And I just quickly want to highlight the fact that it is quite a significant effort in that we have 13 environmental domain research infrastructures involved and 39 partners from 13 European countries. And ultimately, the aim is to see this community grow even larger. So where are we in this effort to try and bring together and integrate the environmental research infrastructures? So initially we focused on looking at the fairness of the different environmental research infrastructures. And by that, I mean, where are we in terms of the adoption of FAIR across the different environmental research infrastructures? And also, how do we promote the development and adoption of FAIR across the different research infrastructures through creation of implementation plans? But we also are focused on the intense cross-fertilization of ENVRI FAIR with the European Open Science Cloud. So we're looking at fairness assessment methods. We're also very focused on delivering training on FAIR and how this can be implemented and adopted across the ENVRI communities. We seek to harmonize FAIR policies and also are bringing together a service catalogue that can be delivered to the European Open Science Cloud. So just to say something about and to give a little bit more detail around some of these activities. So we've developed some fairness assessment methods, but we haven't actually done this in isolation. So in order to avoid reinventing the wheel, we have worked closely with and in collaboration with initiatives such as Go Fair and Fairs Fair. And we're seeking to look at improving and developing fair assessment tools. And we're now moving towards a second stage, which is around advancing these assessment methodologies. But the key thing I want to highlight here is the fact that these assessment methods are fundamental to implementation of FAIR within the environmental research infrastructures. But also, this is an effort where we see the environmental research infrastructures building on the knowledge and expertise that is being developed elsewhere in the research infrastructures, but also related initiatives such as Fairs Fair and Go Fair. One of the key aspects of ENVRI FAIR is looking at common policies. How do we actually converge on common policies that can be adopted throughout the environmental research infrastructures? And so we have conducted a FAIR policy landscape analysis. And the general principle of these policies was that we needed to look at good governance practices and how FAIR can be actually implemented more widely. And to support this, we developed a policy landscape report, which all of the research infrastructures can reference and use as a starting point for implementation of FAIR within their own community. But ENVRI FAIR is also seeking to develop, to actually look at contributing the policies that are being developed within the environmental research infrastructure community to contribute to the wider policies that will be adopted by the European Open Science Cloud. And we see this as an opportunity to provide practical input to the development of the European Open Science Cloud for the future. As I've already mentioned, a key aspect of ENVRI FAIR is training in FAIR, so fairness training as we like to call it. And this is one of the most active areas of ENVRI FAIR in terms of our interactions with our component research infrastructures. And ENVRI FAIR has been contributing extensively to fairness training activities, not just within the environmental research infrastructures, but more widely. The methodology was actually developed as part of an inventory and gap analysis of fairness training materials that is being adopted more widely. And ENVRI FAIR sought to actually develop its own training materials to fill some of these gaps and focus on the needs of the environmental research infrastructures. But our capacity building efforts have not only targeted the ENVRI community, we're also working with non-ENVRI community researchers and other end users. And you can actually look at some of the materials that we've produced and are available for wider adoption at the links that are in these slides. And I believe the slides will be made available elsewhere after this meeting this week. So you can go and review those at your leisure. So I just want to summarize by looking at where ENVRI FAIR is seeking to intersect with the European Open Science Cloud. And we've termed this activity within the ENVRI community as ENVRI FAIR for EOSC. And what I want to highlight is that ENVRI FAIR is contributing to open science and the promotion of open science and the adoption more fairly within the environmental research community, but also more widely among the research communities by providing fairness assessment methodologies, but not by reinventing the wheel, but by building on some of those that are already available, seeking to promote suitable policies and best practices for the implementation and adoption of FAIR, to provide training that's open and available to everyone. But ENVRI FAIR is also contributing to the scientific content of European Open Science Cloud. So we're designing our ENVRI catalogue of services, which will be made available via the EOSC. And we're also designing our own ENVRI hub architecture, which will be fully compliant with the European Open Science Cloud to ensure that there is seamless delivery of the ENVRI services to the European Open Science Cloud. For those of you who are interested in how this approach is being developed and how it will be further developed, and our current status with regards to these activities, we do actually have a report available. And again, there's a link available on the slide that will allow you to perhaps find some more detail. But that's really all I want to say. 10 minutes is not a great deal of time, but hopefully I've given you a flavour of the work that's happening within the ENVRI community to support development of the European Open Science Cloud and the adoption of FAIR within the research infrastructures. And with that, I will hand the floor back to Kostas. Thank you.
You're muted, Kostas.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Helen, and thank you for keeping to the time. If one simple question, but difficult one, if you had to make an estimate of how much of the data are fair today in the broad environment today domain, what would be the number?
Kostas, you said that was a very difficult question, and it is indeed a difficult question, and I don't think I could put a number on it. I would like to be optimistic and say that the number is high, but I think the reality is that there's a lot of work to be done, and so maybe I would turn that question round a little bit, and maybe this sounds like I'm evading the question, which in a way perhaps I am, because I wouldn't like to put a number on it. I think what's more important is that there is increasing recognition of the need to make environmental data more open and available. And this is serving as a driver. And in fact, I think what's happening, what we're all experiencing with this global pandemic is making people realize that making data open and available so that it can be shared and reused more widely is becoming a greater priority. So I wouldn't like to put a number. I would like to hope that it's 50 to 60%. I suspect it's lower, but I think the message is that people see a greater urgency for open data and sharing data. So I would expect that availability of data to grow very rapidly.
Okay, thank you. As Giorgio Rossi said in a comment earlier, for EOS to be successful, it needs to have a significant volume of fair data to be able to work with. And so this is important for all areas, for all speakers. percentage. I didn't mean 21%, for example, or something. But okay, we understand. You could be close to the majority of data claiming to be fair. Okay, then, and I will ask the same question, although again it's a difficult one, to Giovanni Lamanna, who is next. Giovanni, please.
Okay, do you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes,
okay.
We see you and we hear you.
So now I have to share my presentation. Is it okay? Do you see it?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Costas, for the introduction. Thanks for the organizers for inviting us. I will report about the ESCAPE project. First of all, with this slide, I would like to show you the number of ESFRI project and landmarks that are encompassed within the ESCAPE science cluster. You see that our next generation telescopes observing the cosmos at practically the full electromagnetic spectrum, including also other complementary messengers like neutrinos and gravitational waves. And then the clusters also includes two major landmarks in accelerator-based particle physics and nuclear physics, and two major ESO and CERN pan-European research organization. The ESCAPE cluster in astronomy particle physics builds on communities' complementary excellence in data stewardship, the astronomy virtual observatory infrastructure, and the high energy nuclear physics expertise in exabyte scale data management and large scale distributed computing. Builds on existing synergies among the research infrastructures, recognize that our communities will be the exascale data generators and consumers, but in the same time, and because of that, are early adopters of ICT and data management innovations, and they push the state of the art. Finally, we have to consider that both the observatory and facility operations, operations of the next generation facilities require global open access to data, long-term curation, sustainability. So this slide gives you the numbers in a nutshell. I move to the next one just to focus on the 5 pillars of our work program, because the fairness of data and the open science needs for all our projects, a new scalable and federated data infrastructure. That's the data lake. A software repository, since the scientific software is a major component of data to be opened. Virtual observatory, which is a fair infrastructure existing already and has to be included in EOSC. The science platform, because we need to provide the framework to upload the scientists in EOSC. And then keeping open the gateway for citizen participation in scientific discovery. All these 5 pictures are here in this figure. All these 5 pillars are represented in this figure that, as Costas was saying before, mini EOSC, actually our way to see the EOSC concept and its implementation is to build a complete, full consistent EOSC cell that will contribute to the global EOSC implementation through other cells from other communities. Now, I want to give you just a few highlights because after a little bit more than 1 year of activities, we are quite in advance and we are well progressing in our activities. The data lake concept, as I said before, is a concept for a distributed storage for reliability, accessibility, and sustainability. We want to hide the complexity. We want to provide transparent access to data. We federate, obviously, major national data centers, and we also envisage this connection with heterogeneous computing provision, whatever it is, grid, HPC, commercial compute, cloud. And we are quite advancing quite well. Just with this snapshot, I want to show you that we have a pilot with the centers from CERN, from Italy, from France, Germany, Spain, Netherlands, and even with a participation from Australia. And we are succeeding with our dashboard to monitor the quality of data injection replication through some demonstration activities, and which will be followed soon by pipeline data analysis tests with data coming from several of our research infrastructures. The virtual observatory is in ESCAPE working further in cooperation with EOSC-hub and EUDAT to guarantee the inclusiveness into EOSC, and from another side working towards the ESFRI next generation research infrastructure to fulfill the challenge of the large data volumes to be considered and exposed. And furthermore, providing the expertise in data, in fairness data stewardship towards a larger scientific context. I said before, the other pillar is software. And indeed, as you can see through the mind mapping conceptual design of our ESCAPE repository, you see immediately that this pillar is quite a core pillar, because indeed, it's not a question of only having a series of software, but expose the tools of the ESCAPE ESFRI project, but also guarantee continuous development, deployment, preservation of the software, bring the scientists to cooperate together in common developments and add value to the software. So it is really the key element to guarantee the implementation of a virtual research environment that goes with the EOSC cell. But the goal of enhancing the participation of researchers into the EOSC implementation and in uptaking of open science passes through the test science projects proposed to demonstrate multi-domain science integration across ESCAPE, demonstrate new cutting-edge open science capabilities, but also providing feedback on the capabilities and the prototypes delivered by ESCAPE. We want to benefit real science goals in exploring the synergies between the ESFRIs and largely among three scientific communities: astrophysics, astroparticle, accelerator-based particle, and nuclear physics, supported by consortia of European Union member states, research agencies and institutes, with JENA, Joint ECFA-NUPEC APEC activities. It's a question of a top-down endorsement for a bottom-up approach based on expression of interest of scientists and subscribed by researchers. Namely, we focus on a dark matter test science project. To understand the nature of dark matters, we have to collect and combine data pipelines, modeling, contribution from experimentalists and theoreticians, and therefore exploit synergies and feed into EOSC all this know-how to increase the scientific discovery and the scientific and improve the scientific results. The other one is the extreme universe and gravitational waves, because plenty of different types of extreme astrophysical transit needs to be understood and studied through a multi-messenger approach, a multi-probe approach, through an holistic vision. So these two TSPs that are linked with the expression of interest of JENA, and they are already, you visit this website, counting about 1,000 subscribed scientists. And the projects are just starting now. Then I want to talk about the synergies for the present and for the future perspectives. ESCAPE work program has also provided the support to work with PRAISE and GEANT. And I would like to acknowledge here the agreement signed between CERN, particle physics, and SKA, the next generation radio astronomy observatory, with GEANT and PRAISE for cooperate on demonstrator and common aspects. But there are also some synergies that goes a little bit in parallel with our main mainstream work program that are needed to be also mentioned for the future perspective. We explore and plan to support some industrial engagement. We have co-development with some digital SMEs with some successful results. And then another interesting results is the capacity of leveraging EOSC and ESCAPE through local regional projects like IDFIX under the European Regional Development Fund program and French regional funds, networking with the regional industrial companies for data digital uptake, deep learning training, co-developments. And then there are also industrial ICT cooperation schemes within each research infrastructure, and outlook into the future, probably within Horizon Europe, the ESCAPE community proposed connections with the common European data spaces that are mentioned here. And then finally, we have also broader synergy, and I want to underline here the important work that we have started 1 year ago with the periodical meeting with the other 4 clusters and shaping our common vision about the EOSC implementation, participating through documents like the position papers that have been collected, a common position that will be exposed later. Finally, in summary, ESCAPE brings together these large communities, also removing the social barriers that existed in the past, and we are very proud of that. We have experience in supporting broader synergies that are also global, not only European, within a scientific community and also for innovation and society. Key are the test science project for enhancing the researchers' commitment in EOSC, and we look forward to succeed on this in the next couple of years. And then broader synergies also with other science clusters, as I said a few seconds ago. So thanks a lot. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giovanni, also for keeping to the time. Interesting that you mentioned the data spaces, the European data spaces. If I ask the same question I asked to Helen, a short reply.
The question was, what's the
question was that if you had to make a very wild guess of order of magnitude of how much data in your domains you could characterize as fair today, what would it be?
So first of all, Kostas, when I say exascale, because that's the very major problem, because the majority of all the ESFRI landmarks are going to operate as facilities observatory. Therefore, they are going to be open data. Not all levels of data will be open, but at least half of this data, first let's say, will be in open access. But further than this, data are including also the software. So there is, and the new data that are produced by scientists through EOSC on top of those that are delivered. Therefore, I'm quite ambitious, but I will say we are close to the 90% of the global data coming from the next generation facilities. So it's a big endeavor for us, EOSC.
Excellent. Not only open, but also fair. 90%.
Okay, open it is for me used in the sense of fairness of data, so fair data.
Okay, because they can be fair but close.
Indeed, because in our disciplines, as you know very well, there is not embargo, except that for some major discoveries, we expect the declaration of the discovery, the publication. And even in particle physics, we are going towards the astronomical astrophysics approach of delivering. Let me just refer to the successful recent example of the CERN Open Data, that is a portal through which, through samples of LHC data, people not, scientists not in the LHC collaboration are publishing original results.
Okay, okay, thank you. I should say here that more and more we use, at least in the Commission, the term data in the broader sense. So we tend to include in it all types of digital objects, including text, even including software or workflows or whatever else.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Nicholas Bloomberg, you're next.
Thank you. And I need to be allowed to start my video. Thank you, Tassos. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I hope that you can see my slides. Yes. So I'm Niklas Blomberg. I'm coordinating EOSC Life. And so I just would like to tell you a little bit about our vision to establish this open, as we call it, an open collaborative space for digital biology in Europe. And I'll give you a few examples which I hope can fill that sort of mouthful with a little bit of content. And the EOSC Life project brings together all of the 13 life science research infrastructures. And what we want to do is essentially 4 things. So we want to establish this life science European Open Science Cloud by pushing and publishing fair data resources from the research infrastructures and the community into EOSC. And we want to provide the policies and the guidelines and processes that allow us to do that also for personal data, so data from human research participants or even patients in a secure and ethical way. And I think it's fair to say that I mean, collectively, we are likely to sort of push the boundaries of the federated secure data access in Europe. And so there will be a large amount of work on things like distributed analytics or distributed learning and so on in our cluster.
Nicholas, may I just interrupt? Is it possible for you to switch your display? We're currently seeing your presentation in the design mode. You may have an option on your screen to switch display and pick the presentation mode. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Victoria. Sorry for that. So, all of this data isn't really useful unless we have good tools. And so there is a large effort within the project to bring together experts across our research infrastructures and make sure that we have the tool ecosystem and that all our developers understand how to work within EOSC. So there is quite a large training component to our project. And then in the end, and I'll come back to that at the end of this short update, we want to engage with all the scientists outside the research infrastructures via open calls. And we've just opened our first open call for participation where other parts of the community can come in and help to co-create or co-shape the life science part of EOSC. And I'll sort of begin where I guess Helen ended. So we see ourselves as part of the European Open Science Cloud. And we draw on the other components of the e-infrastructures and open science policies. And try to, and so I'll give a few examples where I want to show how we try to link this with the work within the science communities and in this case, the life science community. And so I think there are 2 parts. So a lot of what we do is, of course, to make the research infrastructures in the life science domain ready for EOSC and to work with our users to make sure that they can draw benefit of EOSC. But we also want to help to shape the federating core and integrate the federated core into our services and make sure that the federated core services are capable of responding to the needs from our facilities and data resources. And the same thing with open science. Part of the life science community are well embracing open science. In other parts of the community, I think it's more of a novelty, and I think we want to help to sort of raise all the boats through this project. So in a very quick example, on the federated core, so we are developing what we call the life science authorization system or the life science login system. And so this is bringing together and consolidating existing AAI or authorization system from 3 infrastructures, from Elixir, from BBMRI, and from Instruct. And we're connecting that to the work on the federating core through a partnership with EGI and Géant. It's currently in development, and so towards the end of the project, we will be rolling this out more at scale, and then eventually hope to supersede the different AI systems that we have in the life science domain. We're also listing, so the other little screenshot is from the EOSC marketplace, And so many of our national facilities have, for instance, national clouds that are open to life science users, or indeed to any users. And we have made sure that these also are populated and are accessible through the EOSC market space. So a few examples and use cases, and of course we are all sitting here at home or in our offices very remotely because of the ongoing pandemic. So I wanted to just mention a few things that we've done around COVID-19 and to help to support sort of the very rapid scale up of COVID-19 research that happened in Europe over the last, well, I guess it's 8-9 months now. And I'll give this example. I think it's a really, really good example. And this is work on bringing together analytical pipelines for viral genomes and connect them to open data. So I think it's important to understand, and maybe this is the answer to your question, Kostas, that actually quite a lot of the viral genomes, so the SARS-CoV-2 genomes, are actually provided in a system that is not open, and you have to license them to get access to them. In the early phases of pandemic, there were very few open genomes available for the larger research community. And I think I'd be happy to say that we've contributed to grow that proportion quite substantially. But in the early phases, this was a real challenge for many researchers. And some of the project partners in Germany and in Belgium partnered with collaborators in Australia and US to make sure that we had open reproducible pipelines for the open accessible viral genomes for the whole community. And this was actually provided on in a cloud infrastructure that was open to the world. So also researchers in resource limited settings, say in Africa, could easily access those pipelines and compare to locally generated data. And so I like this example because I think it really shows the value of the open data and how you open data among, and data in this sense of Kostas with open tools, open data, open workflows, open source, really drives and helps with collaboration. There is no encumbrances. But I think it's also a really nice example, and it shows how these European collaborations, when we pull together across countries in Europe, we really become a global player. And I think they are a very strong foundation for global collaboration, global outreach, and global impact. And so I think that's a message I'd like to give here. It's been really impressive on the fast response from our communities. Within life science, there is a workflow system called Galaxy, which has been used by national centers in almost all European countries. They pull together very rapidly around around COVID-19 and to provide open analytics, and we were able to support that through EOSC Life. So a couple of things we did. So one is that we front-loaded some deliverables from EOSC Life that was meant to come in next year and the year after that, and actually we front-loaded the work. And so, for instance, the workflow hub, the registry of all our workflows, was pushed out already in mid-April and started to be populated by COVID-19 workflows. And it was also really nice to see a lot of national centers connected to, well, ELEXI, but connected to EOSC and the national HPC centers, provided in-kind cloud resource for a global COVID-19 biohackathon. And we were able to support that through some of the sort of rapid response calls in EOSC Life. It was a huge success. There were several hundred people joined that virtual biohackathon during 2 weeks in April. And I would also like to acknowledge your partnership, the support from the European Commission. So we have, in rapid response, been able to add 2 new work packages to EOSC Life to support some of the ongoing challenges in the research community. So one is to build a repository for COVID-19 clinical data, and the other is a European COVID-19 data portal, which is actually collecting this open data and pushing it out in an integrated way to the community. And I said before that a lot of viral genomes have been licensed, and now we estimate that about 70% of the world's open viral genomes are pushed through this portal. And we're working with many of the national partners to make sure that we scoop up additional genomes and make sure that they are submitted also to the open databases and not only to the closed WHO system. So I hope that gave you a sort of very quick flavor of EOSC Life. I wanted to end with a plug. We have currently an open call for partnership. And so we're inviting life scientists, both individual scientists, project consortia and strategic initiatives to come and work with us, help with deployment in the cloud or data curation or tools and workflow interoperability. One aspect of this, which I think is really important, is that we're actually providing consultancy and support to applicants during the application writing phase to make sure that a large part of our community isn't technically mature enough to draw benefit from EOSC and the services. And so we want to make sure that they can ask questions and get good technical applications for excellent science, even if the consortium itself doesn't have the technical expertise. And that's been really very well received. So the call has been open for 2 weeks and we already have 19 of these consultancy discussions ongoing. So that's been really well received by our community. So I'll stop there and happy to take questions later in the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Niklas. We go immediately to Patrick Furman. Patrick, please.
Yep. Okay. So there's Niklas is still sharing his slides. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, am I on? Are the slides? Can you see the slides?
That's perfect. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you very much. So let me thank Kostas for this very nice introduction of myself and of the project. And in particular, thank to Miriam for giving me the chance to introduce Panos and Expanse. And thanks to Andy who tricked me into this presentation. I don't know how that happened, but here I am. Good. Of course, the slides have not only been prepared by myself, but by a lot of people within Panos and Expanse. Good. Moving on. This is what we are going to hear within the next 10 minutes. I try to resist to talk too much about Panos and Expanse internals. I would like to introduce how Pan and Panos and Expanse, the community, are involved and how we see our relationship to the EOSC in the future. And there is a slide on what we would expect from EOSC. However, Rudolf will elaborate on this in one of the following presentations in more detail. And then I would like to focus on some highlights, the really selected. We have, of course, many, many more, but these are the ones I like most. Good. Contradicting myself, a little bit about Panos and Expanse. On the left bottom corner, you see the typical cheat sheet. Most importantly here is already that you will notice that Panos has the ESFRI laboratories as target and Expanse the national ones. And as Fulvio already mentioned, the importance of the national ones, which I will elaborate a little bit on in the next slide. Good. Another interesting thing is that the timeline of Panos and Expanse. As you can see, we are right in the right moment for the EOSC association. So we did very well in timing. It's difficult. And even further, Rudolf managed to get Panos and Expanse through PSI and DAISY and ESF into EOSC Future. And EOSC Future actually has the same mantra, I would say, the Panos and Expanse communities have. It is we unlock the potential of European research through a vision of open science for the society. So it's not elaborated some science, it is really for society, beneficial for society. Good, and this is actually the answer of one of the questions to Helmut. This is the relationship between LEAPS, the neutron people lens, and PANOSC and expense and the infrastructures. So on the left side, you will recognize the slide Helmut already shown. This is the LEAPS collaboration. On the right side is a similar picture for lens. And now if we overlay the PANOSC project, which started earlier, then we will see that has already been this is already a nice coverage between lens, LEAPS, and PANOSC. However, the national laboratories are of course missing. And as the ESFRIs and the national ones have essentially the same user community, that doesn't make sense. So we decided to propose a project in 5B, which would cover the rest. And getting the overlay here, so you see that almost all the laboratories in lens and LEAPS are covered. Plus, and this is very important for me to mention, EGI as the overarching infrastructure. So as Miriam was asking me for an example for horizontal infrastructures, but I'll come to this at the end as well. Good, so here you see the importance of the PAN community through PANOSC and expense for EOSC. Good, now the next slides will show you some advantages I think PANOSC and expense can bring to EOSC. However, the most important one definitely is the petabyte of excellent scientific data with significant impact for society we will provide. And this already has been mentioned in Anna's presentation yesterday in the context of COVID-19. It has been mentioned by a lot of my co-workers today and yesterday. The value is the enormous treasure of data, which is beneficial for a large variety of sciences. So with our facilities, we are able to support better medicine and getting, for example, a better understanding of the virus. We can use this with crystallography or with single particle science. We can significantly improve material, which in the end will help fighting us climate change through making better production processes and making them more efficient and evaluating, this is just an example, high capacity and safe batteries for the future, which can move us away from the carbon dioxide problem. And there are many, many more examples. In particular, the COVID-19, which has already been mentioned a lot today and yesterday. There is an increasing number of COVID-related publications, and this is possible. Let me move this away. This is possible because at least I know about 19 facilities with rapid access for COVID-19 related science. So you didn't have to go through the entire proposal process, but we got you a fast track if you relate to COVID-19. And there is as Helmut mentioned, the LEAPS answering to COVID-19 pandemic position paper. And very, very fresh on the right top side, the Diamond people provided me with the most recent publication on COVID-19, which is just 1 hour old. It was published 10 o'clock, or 2 hours, yeah, sorry. Good, moving on. The second important, the second really, really important pillar we would like to contribute to the EOSC is, of course, our people. As mentioned in the presentation about LEAPS, we can offer about 30,000 users from a variety of discipline plus industry on a huge variety of beamlines. And those scientists, they're really eager to contribute to a common scientific success. So we should give them the chance to benefit from EOSC opportunities. And as I think Tiziana will support me, we should give them a significant voice in the EOSC Association. Good, and to prove that I'm not taking some random images from the internet, so I know most of the people in the picture below. I'm cheating a little bit, it's not the users, it's the PANOSC people. Good, moving on. This has been mentioned as well. So it is essential that we pull ourselves together and all the different user communities within PAN come up with the same kind of understanding of data. So in order to do this, PANOSC and expense are providing data management templates and data policy frameworks as blueprints. So the facilities and the beamline scientists and the experiments can take those templates and can adjust it to their needs. This is essential in the future because without DMPs, without data management plan, your data is essentially lost. So we have this, we made this experience in the past at DAISY experiments which don't have such a plan. The data is ending up on some tapes in the cellar and no one knows where it is and what it contains. Similarly, we will standardize metadata schemas, which is really, really more complicated than it sounds. This is in conjunction with metadata ontologies, which is kind of a bucket without a bottom. You fall in and you will never come to an end. But we do our best and we try to get this put together, especially, and our hope is that even cross-domain research can benefit from this. Persistent identifiers clearly for data, but even beyond that for instruments and other entities, sorry. And then, of course, as already mentioned by Helmut, establishing and maintaining a data format standard for all of us, at least for the PAN community. And with this standard, we can come to the EOSC, and through EOSC, we can make all the data available in this particular standardized format. Good. Education training has been mentioned by Niklas, I think, already. It's very important that we provide all the information we have in a consistent way to our students and to newcomers in our field, particularly because there is this question from Kostas, what is the percentage of fair data? We can only increase this if young scientists learn about fair data right when they start their career. And of course, we will provide user meetings and technical workshops where we feed back our experience into the scientist and the ICT personnel. Now coming to tools and infrastructure. As already mentioned, and as Ian mentioned yesterday a lot, AAI is crucial. So we started with Umbrella, and now we are moving this into G and Edo teams to have this in kind of competent hands. We are working on common APIs to access facility ICT infrastructures. This is essential because a lot of our people are moving around from infrastructure to infrastructure, and we would like to give them a common way, feeling at home at all the facilities. Similar metadata catalogs, they should have a common API. Same for logbooks and analysis pipelines, but I'll come to this in a moment. Moving on, in order to plug ourselves into the EOSC, we are of course working on a user portal system, which hopefully can be integrated with the EOSC marketplace at some point in the future, which gives you access to both the historical remote desktops to serve HPC batch systems and modern technologies like Kubernetes, enhanced Jupyter notebooks, and the right-away data view. What we are planning to do is we want to evaluate our fairness with fairness analyzers, which are provided by, at least I know two, Isabel's Synergy project and the EOSC Nordics. They're working on automatic fairness analyzers. And of course, not to forget, and this has been mentioned by Kostas, it's not only data, fair means software as well. Good. So this will be covered, the next slide will be covered by Rudolf. However, for me, important to mention, as Costa says, I'm from the area of data management. So for me, very important that the long-term stewardship of fair data and data preservation is essential for the EOSC. If you don't do that, then EOSC is not really useful for us. But this is really my personal opinion. Okay, coming to the highlights. As already mentioned, fair policies essential for us. I have two statements there as well. Again, it's my opinion. So we are not doing fair just for fair, but the goal is of course open science. And it is just one essential pillar of open science. And it is not the only one. As mentioned, there is preservation and there is software and there's many, many more, even access to computing. And secondly, don't be disappointed. At some point, you will be frustrated by all those fair efforts, but this is quite normal. All of you know the Gartner hype cycle, and we go through this. There's no other chance. There is a hype, and we will fall into the what they called through the disillusion. Illusion. But there is the hope that there is the slope up again. Good. FAIR gives some advantages, and Sophie was so kind to collect them for me. It allows machine readability, it delivers trust, and this is very, very important. Only if we can reproduce our results, there's trust in science. And if there's no trust in science, we see what happens in the US right now, and science is no longer that important. And FAIR data allows more sophisticated search features. So as we are working on ontologies and we are working on metadata and better metadata description, this gives you by far more flexibility in looking for data you need. And it gives you powerful monitoring tools, which is good for management because you can evaluate the time to publication per instrument and you can detect possible new partnerships by monitoring top interest parties. Good. This is what we deliver. Have a look.
Patrick, if you could wrap up in a minute or so.
1 minute. Okay, good. Yeah, no problem. Sorry for that. This is something I like most because I'm a very technical person. This is what I mentioned. What we want is we want to abstract our infrastructure. And this is what we do with the portal. And we're doing this together with Expanse and Panos. So this is a typical PAN facility. And after we abstract all the layers, you have access through mobile apps, graphical interfaces, and command line interfaces into the portal. And it should all look the same theoretically, even if you are, whether you are at Diamond, PSI, DAISY, or XFile. Good. Last but not least, I want to show this for Tiziana. This is the horizontal infrastructure I was talking about, and we successfully using the EGI Fat Cloud through DAISY cloud infrastructures. Together, Panos and Expanse. Panos is doing the development. Expanse is doing the integration into our infrastructure. Good. That was a little bit fast. And this has been mentioned by Jean-Francois in the very beginning. This is what he always says is EOSC is just a federation of your infrastructure. And I would like to confirm that. Good. No summary, no time, but there will be a photonutrient symposium organized by Panos and Expanse in November. Have a look and I hope to see you there. Yeah, sorry, Kostas.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patrick. Go directly to Franziska de Jong.
I have to unshare. Good.
Yeah. Franziska.
I'm trying to get my
okay.
Hold a second.
You're there.
Start my video. That's also right. Okay, then this should be the share button, and now I need to also make sure that it is in share mode.
Yeah, we can see the slide.
Yeah, but I want to have it up. Oh my God. Yeah, here. Okay, I think I'm ready now. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to present SHOCK during this panel. I'm a director of one of the research infrastructures that collaborate in the SHOCK project, which is called Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud. Okay. Yeah. This is a cluster project with research infrastructures in the domain of social science and humanities, as the name is telling you. And it's maybe good to underline that in this domain, or maybe it's even a cluster of domains, people have always been dependent on common services, such as a library. So traditionally, there's a lot of interest and understanding for what a good common service platform could offer. Theoretically, conceptually. In practice, there is a lot of diversity in the maturity among the various domains and sub-disciplines involved. in using tools for digital scholarship, for data science, etc. So there is a lot to be discovered by the community that we are aiming to serve through our integration in EOSC or in the EOSC concept. Because EOSC, just to present a variation on what was just said in the previous talk, EOSC is a cloud of clouds. And so even some of the research infrastructures working on the SHOC project have a distributed structure. So, and all of these nodes have their different level of maturity. What we like to do in the SHOC project is to contribute to the transition from disciplinary silos and separate infrastructural supports into a cloud-based infrastructures for this wider community. Coupled to EOSC, of course, so it's also about the realization of this cloud as part of the of EOSC. How have we planned to do this? Well, first of all, it's good maybe to mention that it is a project working on common data and service protocols that will serve the interoperability of all those data sets and services, and thereby strengthen the support for what can be estimated to be 1/3 of the total research community in Europe, both academic and non-academic. But it's also a support instrument that could be of use for the data science industry. So with this big potential community, half a million, of course, the diversity in tools and methods and traditions and cultures is huge. So I won't even try to attempt to give you an insight in the diversity of research projects or data types that will be supported by SHOC in the end. But it's maybe good to underline that we focus on cluster-specific data and that we would like to focus on data that are entrusted, that fair repositories. So there is cultural heritage content, there are language resources, there is survey data, and a lot more. What is particularly attractive for the partners involved is that SHOC gives all the parties a chance to generalize their thematic service offer, and that includes training, much more effectively than if that would be envisaged through a direct focus on EOSC as a platform. EOSC is a goal in the end, but the project shows that there is clear benefit from taking the next steps in the context of a cluster. So one of the things we could organize is an open call for a repository certification support. So there are research infrastructures in SHOC that have a long tradition of working with certified repositories. So my own organization, Clarin, which is the research infrastructure for language resources, started from day one with the model of distributed network of data infrastructures, and those data centers, and those data centers are only connected to our platform if they are certified in line with the procedures of Core Trust Seal nowadays. So, and I know that, for example, CESDA has the same level of maturity when it comes to repository certification. Some of the other research infrastructures involved started to work on other things and have gradually become interested in this aspect of collaborating in a cluster project. And in SHOC, we can organize support for making that happen. In order to be able to tell you a little bit about how, for an individual research infrastructure, it works to be in a project like SHOC, I will give you a few examples of how we have repackaged our services for the wider SSH domain. I will come back to that later. The examples are switchboard and virtual collection registry. First, I give now an overview slide of what SHOC is. It's a project with 47 partners, a budget of 15 million euros, a little bit less, 40 months duration. And the partners are listed in this slide with, in the lead, the 5 ERGs or ERGs to be from the SSH domain. The impact you will believe, of course. Here is the example of switchboard. So switchboard is a functionality that is essential in a marketplace where tools are offered for researchers that have to operate on data analytic or the task for data analysts, but that are based on language data. So every language has its own particular features and therefore may require specialized software. There are many of those collections and tools, but it's not always easy to find out which tool is best suited for which task. And with the increasing computational requirements and complexity of the algorithms involved, you sometimes don't want to be dependent on local processing. So what you need is support in finding a good match between your task and your goals and the data and tools that could help you with it. That's true for language data, but it's also true for example, people working on social survey data with a language component. They are in need of harmonized dictionaries, for example, for professional occupations. And it's also true for finding suitable visualization tools for scanning artifacts. And for this purpose, in SHOC, we have worked towards the uplift, you could say, of an existing tool into the SHOC cloud. The starting point is the Clarin language resource switchboard that you may have heard about because it was already a stable service in 2018 and integrated at the launch of the EOSC portal. It was based on, since then, functional enhancements were worked on based on the requirements by the Clarin communities of use. Yeah, the usefulness and appeal is determined by what is needed in the Clarin user base. But when we entered SHOC, we offered this service as one of the services that could be upgraded to the SHOC level and made suitable for the needs of people working in that domain. And this is now one of the services that will gradually be prepared for integration in the SSH open marketplace that is being developed. It's an important tool for a large number of researchers, quite diverse, which means that it needs to be adjusted, but anyhow, it's of use for any research use case and also beyond in the non-academic world, as long as there is, it is assuming the availability of machine actionable data. What is essential in this approach is that it gives room for exploration and experimentation. In the end, will lead to integration in a common marketplace, and it's already in SHOC, so that step doesn't even have to be taken. But the preparation of such an integration within a cluster has proven to be very good model. Here you see the description of how this tool works and how it collaborates with other services in the EOSC portal, such as B2Share and B2Drop and B2Find, etc. I won't go into detail here, but now point you to another service that is beneficial for a wide community, and that's the service to create virtual collections. and the functionality to register those virtual collections. So they gave snapshots of search results for specific queries, at a certain point in time. I have here a link available for such a collection, which was a list of documents from PubMed with dimensions of the terms face mask and the term influenza in May 2020. This was an illustration that nicely matched the discussions in public media on the evolution of the pandemic.
Francisca, 1 minute.
Yes, okay. And it illustrates how the services from SHOC can be broadly applied across all domains, and that the cluster stage is a very good condition for this maturing. And I would like to argue that the cluster participants and the clusters should not be hurried into integration in EOSC too early. This is an image of that virtual collection. This is my last slide. I think the SSH agenda can benefit a lot from SHOC and the open marketplace because it brings better visibility and support for previously underexplored resources with a huge potential for multidisciplinary work. For example, parliamentary records to study public domain debate on all kinds of global issues, heterogeneous data collections that can be explored for tools for text and data minings. There was a hackathon on the detection of disinformation, for example. Speech data in multiple languages can be used by clinical practitioners for studying and treating speech disorders or for detecting Alzheimer at an early stage. We collaborate with an initiative which is called EOSC-hub, which brings high quality firm level data, interesting for people studying and policymakers studying the dynamics in the economy. And there are many opportunities and resources that will become available for training. So we will deliver a new generation of people that are familiar with, on the one hand, digital scholarship, but also have these generic data science skills that society needs nowadays. And this is all in line with the open data science agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go directly to Rudolf Dimper. If you could please keep the 10 minutes so that we have just 5 minutes left for a couple of questions. Thanks.
I will do my best. Let me find first of all my presentation. So is this in presentation mode? I'm not sure.
Yes, we can see it.
Fantastic. So let me start. So my name is Rudolf Dimper. I'm from the ESRF, the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility. That's the place you see in the background. I'm sitting approximately here. So I'm presenting today on behalf of the cluster projects, the 5 cluster projects, EXPANS, and the European e-infrastructures, because we came together reflecting on the SRIA consultation and whether we should and what kind of feedback we could possibly give to that consultation process. So thank you very much for the organizers giving me the opportunity to present this. So why a common statement to the SRIA? So obviously, making this together, we thought that would have a bit more weight than individual feedbacks, and writing it directly on a piece of paper and not entering it into pre-formatted forms also provided maybe a little bit of more freedom to give that feedback. So we came together, brainstormed, and thought about what needs to be further emphasized for the SRIA. That led to 2 different papers. one short paper from Panosk and Expanse, and the other one from the 5 clusters and the 4 European infrastructure organizations. You see the logos here on that slide. So our first point was that the SRIA did not, unfortunately, talk a lot about users. And we do believe that the uptake by the researchers will be in the few next years to come the main key performance indicator, which will decide of whether the EOSC is really a success or not. So that's an important message that from our perspective, we think we have to make sure now that EOSC is known by the researchers, the scientists. They understand what it is about and they find added value by using it.
Rudolf, may I just interrupt and encourage you to switch the display screen view over to the presenting mode?
I thought I did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that better? Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I have to remove that. Okay. Now, the next point for the SRIA was that we were looking for research-oriented services, and that means in particular services which relate to infrastructure, allowing to visualize, analyze data which is stored somewhere, not necessarily in the research infrastructures, and I come back to this. And I think it has also been mentioned already by Patrick. So we need EOSC to take up a mandate to provide some physical resources for the reasons I will go into now. And that concerns foremost data preservation, but not only because data preservation, of course, makes no sense if the data cannot be reused and reanalyzed, reprocessed. Most of the research infrastructures have a data policy in place. This data policy clearly defines that we will archive and preserve the data for 5 to 10 years. But what happens beyond that? Beyond that, I hope we will not be obliged to hit the delete button, but that we can find a space where to put that data. Some of the data sets clearly will be of enormous value for the future and for the long future, so they would need to be preserved forever. And I would like to go briefly into one example. Here you have a fossil from a unique fossil, Halscaraptor, which came to our laboratory, the ESRF, which is a hard X-ray source. And we put this fossil into the beam and scanned it and reconstructed a 3-dimensional model. So the sample comes from, the fossil comes from Mongolia. It's the only known fossil of that type of dinosaur. So it dates back to between 72 and 75 million years. And we had the unique opportunity to scan it. The reconstruction of the fossil gave this cute little animal, a very strange, small dinosaur, not very big, as you can see on the right-hand lower corner in comparison to a person. So this is how the animal looks like, and of course it gives stunning information about evolutions of dinosaurs in that at the time. The sample will only come once to an analytical facility like the ESRF. It will now go back to Mongolia and stay there as a national treasure. Now, the little side effect, of course, is such as this cute little animal. If ever you come across it, be aware, although it looks like a cute little duck, it has loads of teeth, very sharp teeth, more like a crocodile. And it has a little claw which can be deadly, maybe not for human beings, but for many other animals. So this one was certainly a predator and cute looking, but nevertheless dangerous, as it happens very often in real life. The cute looking things are not necessarily peaceful. Now, coming back to the ESFRI, so I made that point. So we have to preserve many data sets long term, and that is not only for fossils, but we are now entering into a new domain where we will have samples of human organs, of other large objects, but also of smaller samples, which will only have the possibility to come once to an analytical facility, and it will not be possible to measure them twice. Many of the cultural heritage objects are in that situation. So long-term preservation is really an issue. Now, concerning the ESFRI, back to the ESFRI, trust-based open access, we thought that looking at the ESFRI, there is maybe a tendency, at least from our side, it would be a fear that contributions and usage of EOSC may become overly complex, and that could create a barrier. So we would like to make sure that this doesn't happen. We also think that we need a balanced top-down and bottom-up approach in the governance. And that in particular also will include the user communities. Support and coordination. We all know that EOSC in the moment consists of a large number of individual projects, which are not all of them working as closely together as the science clusters do. We believe that there is a clear need for stronger coordination between the current and future EU-funded projects. And that also implies a strong participation from the user communities to shape EOSC. And here we refer in particular to the EOSC governance. Sustainability is a very important aspect, obviously, and without sustainability, and that was mentioned already a couple of times in this workshop, things will go belly up quite soon. So we need a sustainable infrastructure, we need a sustainable ecosystem, ecosystem, so there need to be funding mechanisms, but funding mechanisms which must avoid complex commercial transactions. Scientists will not enter into this. Clearly not, because as you know, I mean, science in Europe, not only in Europe, is publicly funded, and researchers do not have the habit of pulling out their credit card for doing science. So sustainability is fundamental for the long-term engagement of all key actors. Collaboration. So we have seen that it is possible to work together, also with larger communities. So the ESFRI science clusters and the European e-infrastructures are committed to work together, although that's not easy. We are not coming from the same world, but we are pulling it together. We discuss, debate, and come to a consensus. So this is new, and it's a very powerful mechanism. So I think this merits to be continued to make sure that EOSC becomes a success. So we have managed to write these common position papers. So that's an excellent sign for the future, clearly. What we see, of course, is that the science clusters are projects, and beyond the project duration, there has to be something which makes sure that the science clusters persist and can continue working together with EOSC and all the key stakeholders. Of course, we want to bring our user communities to EOSC. That is also a medium and long-term process. I want to conclude with one statement concerning fair data management. It has, of course, been mentioned many times. That's more than normal. So I would like to say that fair data management is not EOSC specific. It's from our perspective simply best practice. It's a basic foundation to do other things like EOSC. It is expensive to implement, and it also takes a lot of time. We are grateful that we got the support from Horizon 2020 to do this, because otherwise it would have been difficult in our research infrastructures to implement it at that speed. It would have certainly taken much, much longer because of the need to convince the lab management that this is something extremely important to do. Nevertheless, we shouldn't take it for granted that everybody understands what FAIR is. We must continue to get support for fair data management. We must continue to make sure that everybody understands what is at stake and why fair data management is important. We had lately an example from the lab management that, again, there is a lack of understanding, and we must keep up the effort to make sure that we rub it in a certain sense. So more work. Sorry, I'm going backward. With that, I would like to conclude and thank you for your attention. You can find the two documents which I were referring to in on the links you find on this last slide, which I suppose the slides will be shared in one way or the other through the workshop. And with that, I'm more than happy to answer to your questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rudolf. So it is very important, as you say, that the clusters contribute, and all ESFRIs contribute to the EOSC Strategic Research Innovation Agenda. It's a very important link between these well-organized scientific communities and their users and the EOSC infrastructure. So therefore, I guess you are optimistic that I think there are 21 ERICs among the 55 ESFRI projects. So I guess you're optimistic that all 21 ERICs will become members of the EOSC Association, whose job will be to elaborate the strategic research agenda in the future.
Well, at least we are trying our best to drum up support and to become members and observers of the EOSC Association. I think that had already a certain success. We are continuing to do this. It's not an easy one because obviously one has to read the papers, the statutes very carefully. One has also to find somebody in each laboratory who has the time to devote to be member observer in the association. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to pay the fees. In fact, that's, I think, fundamental. But I'm very optimistic that this goes along. Clearly, I think that our voice, the voice from the research infrastructures, has to be as strong as possible in the EOSC Association to really establish a strong link to the researchers, to the science communities in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Our time is up. It's 47. So we're actually 2 minutes over time. A number of the questions have been responded to already. There are 4 open questions. Unfortunately, we cannot go through them, but I think at least 3 out of the 4 can be responded to relatively briefly in writing. So I have to close this here. However, I would like, it is Victoria Douglas that has to say the last words regarding the follow-up, how we log on into the next sessions. Thank you very much for all your contributions. It was a very dense and rich session that makes me optimistic about the future of EOSC in its relation with the ESFRIs. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Victoria.
Kostas, and thanks to all. We are due back for the breakout sessions at 2 p.m. These will be held in the Zoom meeting. So you will have all received a link to this via email with a passcode. So if you move to the Zoom meeting for the 2 o'clock breakout sessions, we would invite you to head over to the Zoom meeting at 1:30 so that we can set you up and get you allocated to the appropriate session. So if you head over there for 1:30, though the breakout sessions themselves won't start until 2. And just as a reminder, we still have the questions for the breakout sessions are available on the event webpage in the questionnaire. So you're very welcome to go and take a look at those questions in advance of the breakout sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.